Now, in the wake of constant regulatory changes, wealth managers have to rework their business models. Now, to learn how we can thrive in a landscape of heightened regulation, we have with us an eminent panel. So let me begin by welcoming Nilesh Shah, who is the MD and CEO of Kotak AMC. Nilesh will also be moderating this panel for us. Joining this panel is Jignesh Desai, who is the founder of NJ India. I now invite Prathit Bhobe, who heads Wealth Management and Privileged Banking at ICICI Bank. Next, please welcome Satish Krishnamurthy, who is the head of Affluent Business at Axis Bank. Also joining them is Sriram Iyer, CEO Wealth Management at Religare Private Wealth. And finally, we have Vivek Kanwar, Senior President, who will be joining us in a couple of minutes from now. With that, it's over to you, Nilesh.
Hi. Am I audible? Good. Good afternoon to all of you. We have been given the unenviable task of keeping you awake post-lunch session. And fortunately for you, this time I am not going to speak. I'm more going to moderate. So hopefully all of you will remain awake. If we see in the medical fraternity, I mean, people sell medicines which are not necessarily best suited for customers. And on top of it, they charge margins which are 30, 40, 50% also. And yet, no one in the country goes against the chemist and druggist saying that you are mis-selling or you are overcharging. But when we come to distributors, especially mutual fund, I mean, we are selling wealth-creating products to the customer. There's no incidence of any customer dying because of buying a mutual fund. And yet, we are seeing lots of fingers pointed towards us. So my first question to this panel will be, quickly, why do you think that is happening? Why do you think people are not able to appreciate the good work done by the distributor community? We'll start with left to right.
So, thanks, Nilesh Bhai. I think this is always the toughest question, right? All of us in this room, either as financial distributors or investment advisors, we do a lot of hard work in trying to educate customers about the value we bring, right? Whether it is in terms of their right asset allocation, in terms of making sure their financial goals are met. But still, customers and more importantly, the regulator has always that suspicion. Are we doing enough? Is there enough value being created? And I think the key solution to that puzzle is communication. And I think all stakeholders, whether it is manufacturers, which is all the asset management companies, the 40-odd asset management companies that are in play, all the large banks, all the IAs who are in this room, I think we need to unite much more strongly through various fora. And I think we should think about many more creative ways, especially given that we are in a digital era. I don't think we are leveraging the power of social media to communicate the good that we are bringing to the table. Right? And like you interestingly mentioned, Nilesh Bhai, I think if we were to apply the same standards in the medical profession, somebody was saying the number of deaths that happened due to poor administration of medical treatment, it's equivalent to 2 Boeings falling off the air every day. That's how badly medical care is today, right, across the world. And having said that, I don't think we are anywhere close to that level of, misses in our industry. And I think the critical requirement, therefore, for us is to up the ante on communication and reach customers in language that they understand. And I think the journey is just getting even more interesting with much more intricate regulations.
Okay. Yeah. So Satish thinks communication is the answer. Prateek?
So I partly endorse what Satish is saying. I think this whole quest towards heightened regulation, I think, is obviously something which has been imported, as many of the things in this country are. And while, obviously the regulator is, I guess, looking overseas and then looking at emulating some of those best practices, I think it is important to, and that's where I think what Satish said made a lot of sense, that it is very important, and it's important for all the incumbents, irrespective of what part of the community you belong to really communicate far more aggressively, whether through social media or directly, and correspond with the regulator with respect to the stuff that they are doing. I think there is a lot of good which institutions are doing, a lot of good which I'm sure the IFAs are doing individually, a lot of good that the manufacturers are doing individually, which is sort of self-regulated. It's being done because it's right to do by the customer. But I think all of that gets done internally, and the use and the benefit of that gets seen internally by the institutions. I think if we can somewhere put it out in the public domain, right, and reach out to the regulator saying all this is being done anyway in order to improve some of the potential issues that the regulator foresees, I think that will help take care of some of the worries that the regulator may have. Because right now, I think a lot of this is one-sided. It's being driven by, like I said, what the regulator sees outside may not be really ground up, because I don't think we see as many cases of, either you could call it mis-sell or whatever, emanating from the ground. But I think a lot of is being done in order to provide a framework to avoid those. And I really think all the entities within are doing enough to sort of take care of that within. I just think communication is important.
Okay. So effectively what, Pratit, you are saying is that we should be publishing more of such kind of
more
research?
of these. More of
Prem,
these.
you need to work more harder. Jignesh bhai, you are present in the length and breadth of the country. You are running maximum SIPs in the country. Where do you think the good work done by yourself and equivalent of your peers is not necessarily being reflected as much as it should be appreciated?
Thank you, Nilesh bhai. I think the biggest challenge for all of us, largely financial advisors, maybe a wealth manager or an independent financial advisor, is a question on the reputation of an advisor. I think the biggest challenge for all of us is how we can create a structure whereby we can display our work. Today, there is a very strong association of manufacturers. They work in the interest of manufacturers. And there are few associations of financial advisors, national distributors. But there is no common platform for a mutual fund industry where you can create a 2 or 3 minimum agenda. Just to give you an example of creating a long-term design for an advisory business, A. B, our liquid funds are so efficient where the retail participation is very minimal. Even in our book also, we have about 27,000 crores of asset. Out of that, 25,000 is equity. That is good. But even if we can create a structure like check writing facilities in our liquid fund, then definitely it is going to be a great product for our retail investors. Now here the question is,
Jignesh bhai, you haven't shorted banks and then making this suggestion.
No, I think that the regulator also wants to protect investor, irrespective of bank or IFAs or, so I am in line with the regulator. So I think we need a very common platform where we can discuss a few agendas, 1 or 2 agendas maybe, and then independently manufacturers association can work on their interest, the distributor association can work in their interest. But currently, I think the missing part in the whole game is we do not have any clarity after spending 23 years in this business or a profession, whatever we call it. what is going to happen in next 10 years or 15 years. So we don't have any design, any format, any vision statement, any vision document for this industry. I think that is the unfortunate part.
Thanks, Jignesh bhai. Shriram, what do you think is, restricting the appreciation of the work done by the distributor community? Communication is one part, vision and mission is another part. What else?
Sure. I think, I think you made a very nice analogy about chemists, stroke pharmacists, doctors prescribing the medicine, and then the wealth management industry or the financial services industry. I think so why, let's start with why is the regulator so active, right? I think there have been some instances of quacks coming into the business and administering wrong medicines to patients. And therefore, some patients have been affected. Now, it has not caused death. I think that's a known fact. But I think it has caused harm, right? And we see that in enough portfolios. And I think all of us must acknowledge that there is some harm that has happened in portfolios. So therefore, so that's possible. And the level of communication around that is very heightened because it's got to do with money. Therefore, there is a lot of media attention that happens around anything that causes loss of money and, of course, loss of life as well. So that's possibly the reason why the regulators are extremely active and wanting to do more to make sure that there is, let's say, client centricity. I think all of us are on the same page. Client centricity is important. I think other than communication and other than having a national forum, I think one or a common forum, I think one thing that, again, coming back to the analogy that you drew, Nilesh bhai, about the medical practice and the financial services practice, for you to practice as a doctor, you need to be an MBBS certificate holder, right? You need to have gone through the grind of 5 or 7 years, and then you get rewarded an MBA degree, MBBS degree, after which you can practice. In our industry, unfortunately, I think the only requirement that is there is an AMFI examination, right? Which we think, pardon me for saying this, but it's an apology of an examination, right? Anybody with 5 hours of preparation can clear it, right? So I think other than all of the other points of the panel, very valid points that the panelists made, I think the need to have a certification module which is credible, right? Which can stand the test of time, I think is critical. All the stuff that we hear about from the regulatory angle is pricing disclosure. There is hardly any prescription around who can sell, right? That I think is a big missing link that can potentially address this whole and hopefully give the regulators more comfort that the right kind of people are selling the products, and therefore the whole ecosystem is geared to penalize in case somebody were to, the same happens in law, the same happens in the medical practice as well, right? If you missell or if you misadminister a medicine, you get hauled over the coals, right? There are, of course, black sheep there as well. But I think a certification mechanism which is overarching and which is credible, I think is the need of the hour.
So some of the points, Vivek, where, the distributor community hasn't been appreciated as much. Yeah. So communication, quality of people who are entering business, vision statement, and so on and so forth. Since you are the last person, I'll give you choice of 2 questions. One, will Yes Bank deliver next year same return as it is delivered last year? Or do you want to talk about distributors?
No, on the first, I think the way things are going for the bank, I think it should deliver better returns.
Okay.
Okay. So, no, I have personally no doubts about that. But having joined the panel, and it's a forum where I would definitely like to put my views. I think the truth is somewhere in the middle. Okay, it's neither this way or not that way. I don't think there has been any meaningful dialogue between the regulator and the distribution community. It has been enforced through a manufacturer body. So the whole tone has to be that yes, we involve you, and it's very unfortunate that the SRO decision, which was very good, has gone into litigation and SRO has not come into functioning. But these kind of self-regulations have to be done by the SROs, and regulators should not frequently come in the market and give some reactions, which and without dialogue, because which can in the long term harm industry a lot. If you have a cancer in some part of the body, you cure that part, or even if desired, remove that part. You can't kill the person for some minor cancer somewhere in the body, is the approach which we have to take. So I personally believe truth is somewhere in the middle. I don't think regulator is totally wrong in what they have done. Probably I would say is a knee jerk. And distributors are also not all are holy and holier than thou. They have also done some excesses. So we need to correct it, but the best people to correct it is the SRO. So I think once SRO comes into its being, they would be in the best position to address it, keeping in mind the long-term growth. See, in a country of over 110 crores, we have less than 2 crore demat accounts. And if we all know if meaningful demat accounts kitne honge usme se. If you remove combinations, some which have been taken only for IPO, etc. What are we talking? When we need to increase the penetration of financial products in the country, increase the financial literacy in the country, if we compare it analogy, we need more doctors, and what we are focusing on how much a doctor should charge. We all know we need more doctors, we need more IAs, we need more people in the industry to intermediate. So we have to step back and take a more holistic view, is in my opinion.
Okay, thanks Vivek. Satish, taking over from Vivek, we have seen launch of Jan Dhan Yojana, creating 25 crore bank accounts, bringing bank to the unbanked and so on and so forth. If at all government decides to launch Jan Nivesh Yojana, giving targets that let's open 25 crore mutual fund folios or bank demat accounts or brokerage accounts, what do you think is required to make that Jan Nivesh successful? As a distributor, what will you require from regulator to make Jan Nivesh successful?
I think if Jan Nivesh, I think, will be a serious, I think we spoke about vision being absent today. If I look at the industry as a whole, I think it will first ignite the length and breadth of the country, that there is a great way of creating real wealth, right? The right way. So that's one. I think first and foremost, it will ignite the population. The way Jan Dhan Yojana was driven, and I mean, it is great compliments to this current government, right? The rigor and being part of the banking fraternity, I can tell you that it's almost like a corporate monitoring in terms of what's the progress. So the same rigor, if it could be brought with the right intention, saying if, and we all know, I mean, data not only from India, but across the globe, across cycles, proves repeatedly that the truest long-term wealth creation model is the NJ model, for example, right? Systematic investment plans, day in and day out, build that wealth like a sparrow, right? And you create great wealth. I think if the government can take it upon ourselves, together with key stakeholders, whether it is the regulator, and drive this first with that ambitious goal. I'm sure, I can speak from Axis's standpoint, right? Or for that matter, other private sector banks. We will all be very excited. And we truly believe that today what ails us is sheer the cost of administering such a large-scaled vision. So if we can get rid of the bureaucracy, which is in terms of the paperwork which is required, and I think a lot of work is already in play with simplification of KYC through the Aadhaar route. If we can actually make that play out in an execution method, I think miracles can happen, right? And I think, Nilesh Bhai, I think if there's one big takeaway is an idea like this, I think which can really excite the entire industry.
Sure. Prateek, do you think technology is actually a solution for launching something like Jan Nivesh, or even overcoming the heightened wall of regulations? Is technology a disruption or a facilitator in your opinion?
So it certainly is a facilitator. I have no doubt technology in all aspects, including something like a Jan Nivesh, will be a huge facilitator. I mean, if you just look at, well, it's a small example, but if you look at the next PM scheme which the government launched, which was the one in which we did general insurance and life insurance for within 330 rupees and 12 rupees, if I remember correctly, for individuals. There, they enabled us to get a customer to subscribe just by way of SMS. So all we had to do is send SMSs out, and if somebody replied with saying he was interested, that person was enrolled. It couldn't have possibly been simpler than that. I mean, I couldn't think of anything, given the proliferation of phones that we have in the country, and they specifically gave us an exemption for this. The scale up that we saw was quick, right? And the price point they provided was interesting. And like I said, it was a simple SMS which got sent out and was enabled. So I think just to pick up on the earlier point of Aadhaar, where they've now allowed investments provided there is an Aadhaar number up to 50,000, I think is a huge enabler with the increased digitization, with almost all banks today now proliferating biometric devices. The ability of a customer to invest through Aadhaar is really phenomenal. So I think a technology enablement is a given. It's just that the rigor of driving it needs to be enabled in the system. I think that happens. This Jan Nivesh can be, equivalent idea can be a huge success.
Jignesh bhai, you have been using technology to reach out to so many people. Apart from technology, if you can also share some idea about how are you mining data about customer, how are you equipping your IFAs to reach out to the right customers, service them in right manner at lowest cost possible. So how is